generator rules, including conditions for exemption, small quantity generators sending their waste to large quantity generators, hazard labeling, weekly inspections, and episodic events. This is a lot of information, but remember, we have plenty of time for question and answer after each brief presentation. I want to point out that we decided on these topics based on what we thought would garner the most questions. After we cover these topics, we should have plenty of time for questions at the end if you want to ask questions or comment on other aspects of the rulemaking if you have them. We can also use that time to address questions that came up for you, and we've already moved past that topic. So first, Rob Rake is going to go over the rulemaking schedule and some of the past comments we've gotten on the aspects of this rule.
Good afternoon, everybody. So this rulemaking process here for the dangerous waste regulations will take longer than normal compared to last rule revisions. We have, if you look at the rulemaking schedule timeline, it's about 3 years overall, compared to normally about 16 months. As I talk a little bit here, you'll understand why we're at this longer time period here. And we're in the middle right now, public comments, October, December 2017. So at the beginning of the timeline there, not the beginning of the world, but beginning of our dangerous waste rulemaking here. In early 2016, we filed a notice of intent to start rulemaking in the Washington State Register. And this notice is called a CR 101. At that time, we proposed to adopt new EPA rules on the definition of solid waste legitimacy criteria for recycling, some rules for cathode ray tube exporting, new regulations on hazardous waste pharmaceuticals, solvent contaminated wipes, and a few minor state-initiated technical changes. So for the first half of 2016, internally, Ecology worked on developing draft rule language. Then fall last year, we put our draft rules out for public comment, just like we're doing now. We had a 90-day public review. And in the next slide, I'm going to talk a little bit about those comments that we received. About the same time last year, November 2016, EPA issued some final rules for a new big rule called the Generator Improvement Rule. I'm going to be referring to that as GER. And some updates to export-import rules. And EPA also said at that time that they were delaying adoption of the final hazardous waste pharmaceutical rule. This threw a wrench into our rulemaking schedule since we had intended to adopt some revised rules in early 2018. So adopting regulations for managing pharmaceuticals is a big issue and important to ecology and healthcare facilities. And we still really wanted to include that pharmaceutical rule in our package. So since our rulemaking was delayed anyway, Ecology decided to roll GER into our current rulemaking. And we also added in import-export revisions and the first phase electronic manifest rule. So in early 2000, part of this year, what we did was we withdrew the existing 2016 CR 101 and immediately filed an updated CR 101. So if you happen to look on our dangerous waste rulemaking website, you can see that activity. So what we did was, in effect, we kept all the draft rules listed in the 2016 CR 101, but added in the GER and these two other rules, both of which EPA requires states to adopt. So at this point, as I said, there's a 60-day public informal comment period open on draft rules, set to close December 19th. And we are asking commenters to focus your comments on the GER changes. since we already took comments on the 2016 draft revisions, at this time we want to hear your thoughts on the GER changes. Comments on the e-manifest and import-export rules will be accepted, but these are EPA rules and we can't change them. We will take your comments into consideration and make changes to draft rules as appropriate. So we're set to propose rules mid-2018 with a formal public hearing and comment period. So there'll be another period for people to give us their input. And we expect to adopt new regulations December 2018, effective 31 days after that. So I want to let you know, due to some comments that we got at a public meeting that we held last week on dangerous waste rule amendments, we're going to go ahead and post the comments that we did receive from people on the pharmaceutical rule, and those will be on our Ecology rulemaking website. And I believe that website address will be on the last slide in this presentation. So we did receive some comments from some national healthcare organizations that were mostly centered on the pharmaceutical rule. They did pass along some comments they had made to EPA on the hazardous waste pharmaceutical rule, but they also had some specific comments on areas where the state went beyond the federal proposal. And one organization asked that Ecology wait to adopt a pharmaceutical rule until EPA adopted their final rule, stressing that it is better to have national consistency. And Ecology agrees with that, and we're hoping to see a final EPA hazardous waste pharmaceutical rule late spring next year. And I can add that also we received some comments from a major medical waste and hazardous waste service provider having to do with our draft rules about managing dangerous waste sharps and some other topics where the state went beyond EPA's rule. And I want to mention that this EPA rule on hazardous waste pharmaceuticals will be mandatory for healthcare facilities, and our state rules, of course, need to be at least as stringent as EPA.
Okay, great. Thank you, Rob. So we are going to open the floor for questions, and I wanted to let you know that if you had signed up and registered before around 11:30, we would have sent you an email with some attachments that will help you as we go through the presentation. If you, for some reason, can't see, there's a PDF of our presentation in that email. We've also attached a summary document of the proposed rule changes, a crosswalk, which is kind of in this draft form, but really helps you see where maybe some new regulations or regulations have moved from. So let's see if we have any questions. So far, none. I'll give you a couple more minutes. I know it takes some time to type in. As our presenters are talking, and if a question comes up, you can type into the Q&A. We won't get to that until the end of their presentation, but I just wanted you to know that you have a little bit more time to type in some questions. Okay. Seeing no questions, we'll move on to the next topic.
Okay, hey everybody, this is Tom Cusack. Hey, I'm a little farther away from the speaker than Rob, so if you can't hear me, send a shout out to the chat line there. So the first group of rules I'm going to talk about is the import-export rules from EPA. Now these rules came out in 2016. A month later, in December 2016, they became final. Now, all states, including Washington State, have to adopt these rules, and that really is it's an equivalency issue. Therefore, we remain equivalent, our state rules will remain equivalent with EPA's rules regarding this group of rules, this issue. Now, once we adopt the rules, it'll actually be EPA that implements them. In other words, they're not going to authorize Washington State or any other states really for these rules, because now it becomes a foreign policy issue, and EPA is going to deal, as you can imagine now, with foreign policies. So one big thing that this rule does, among several things, one big thing is that if you're a generator, then you're probably used to. Oh, let me just mention too is that the last public forum we had, there was only 2 people that were actually importing or exporting rules. So I realize that this set of rules may not affect most of the listeners today, but nevertheless, it's a rule we're picking up. So like I said, the import-export rule, one of the big things is that if you're a generator and you happen to be importing or exporting rules, wastes, then you're used to using what's referred to as 40 CFR Part 262, subpart E and F. So what this rule does, this new import-export rule, is it basically cans those 2 subparts. So it's getting rid of those 2 subparts and replacing them with subpart H. Now, part of the reason is that subpart H already exists, and it's being used by an organization referred to as OECD, so the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development. And the United States is part of this group. It's about 35, say countries, and they have in place a method or set of rules on how to import-export waste among themselves. And so, rather than having 3 different import-export type related rules, there's just going to be one, and it's subpart H. Now, this rule does other things as well. What EPA is trying to do is create a better national coordination between EPA and the foreign countries, between EPA headquarters and EPA regions, between EPA and the states. What this rule also does, it tries to, what it's going to do is expedite information between transporters, generators, between states and the EPA as well. Another thing this import-export rule does is that currently, with importing and exporting waste, there's lots of paper-type requirements, like certifications or submittals or validations or certificates of acceptance. And so what the subpart H, import-export rule does is supports and encourages the transfer of the paper requirements into electronic requirements. So a few of the highlights of the import-export rule is that it's going to be expanded. So subpart H is going to apply to universal waste. Universal waste are going to be recycled or disposed of. They're going to apply to spent lead acid batteries, cathode ray tubes, and it'll apply to samples of a certain size. I believe it's like 15 kilograms. Another thing this rule does is that it expands the definition of exporters to include traders. Now, a trader is somebody, an individual in the United States that participates, helps with the transfer, the movement, the arrangements of hazardous waste in and out of the country. The big thing here is that traders will be required to get an EPA ID number. And what EPA was thinking is that traders are a key point, a key player, ensuring that the hazardous waste is transported by legitimate transporters. As the waste goes through numerous different ports, traders help making sure that with their arrangements that the ports are legitimate, the transporters are legitimate, and the final deposition, if it's a recycler or a disposal site, that is all legit. So, like I said, this rule may not affect many of you, so this presentation is kind of short, and if you guys have any questions, I'll start taking those now.
All right, so we'll be accepting questions. If you have a question for Tom about the import and export rule, type your question into the question and answer feature and send it to the host. Please note that we will be accepting comments, questions, and ideas until December 19th, so this isn't your only opportunity to be heard by us. I'll give us a few seconds, maybe 30 seconds, to wait for any questions. Like Tom said, this may not affect a lot of people, so I'm actually not expecting a lot of questions here. Okay. Oh, when will the new electronic manifesting be in place? Wow, we are...
Oh, horses, man, I'm not there yet.
That is a great segue. That's from Gary Barkland. So we'll get to that in our next section.
Holy cow.
All right. Let's go on.
Okay, well, I think I just might talk about e-manifests. Thank you. Hey, so, and just remember that the topics that Rob and I are going to be talking about today may not cover a particular issue you have with, say, e-manifest or the generator improvement rule. But at the end of all these presentations, keep your questions, and we'll try to answer them anyway. So, they're all good questions, no bad questions. Okay, so now we're back to the presentation. So now I'm going to give a little spiel on e-manifest. So e-manifest regulations, just like the import-export rules, are a set of rules that all states, including Washington State, are required to pick out. Now this rule, the e-manifest rule, came out in 2014, February 2014. The effective date was 6 months later, so August 2014. However, the implementation date is expected to be June 2018. And so EPA has needed this time to develop and test a national program for collecting e-manifest. And it will be EPA collecting these. It won't be the state of Washington, and if you're calling from listening from other states, it won't be your home state either. This is a system EPA will be implementing. Well, yeah, they'll be collecting the manifest, not us. Now, we will be adopting the e-manifest rule. Is going to be placed at the end of where our manifest rules are right now, at the end of section 180. And the goal, one of the big goals for the e-manifest rule is that eventually EPA wants to can the paper manifest, you guys. They want to go straight to e-manifest. I think, however, EPA believes that there will be eventually some people that don't have a computer, will not have access, so the paper manifest will still be available, but the goal is to get rid of paper manifest. Now, the purpose of the e-manifest rule is better tracking of waste from cradle to grave. So from the transporter all the way, from the generator through the different transporters all the way to the designated facility, which could be the recycler as well. And it's going to provide real-time data so that, for example, a generator, if he hasn't heard back from the transporter, he'll know, he can find out where those waste is. Another purpose of the rule is that EPA, like I said, is trying to create a national electronic system, getting rid of the paper manifest. These electronic manifests, just like the paper manifest today, are not considered confidential business information. So, it will be the manifest paper manifest and electronic manifest, will be available to the public. They will be available to TSDs, to generators, to competitors, you name it. So EPA wants this to be a very, transparent system. Another purpose of the rule is to help with mistakes or concerns, especially with discrepancies, manifest discrepancies, so that these discrepancies can be addressed pretty quick compared to how they are now. Now, what EPA wants you to know is that these electronic manifests, along with their electronic or e-signatures, are going to be legally equivalent to a paper manifest and legally equivalent to a handwritten signature. The manifest also, sorry about that, I forgot I had a slide. The manifest, just like the paper manifest today, the electronic manifest will be set up to accept state-only waste codes. So for example, today, if you have a paper manifest and the only waste you generate is like WTO2 and you have to manifest it over to Maryland, you use a manifest, a paper manifest. Well, the electronic manifest will accommodate that as well. Now, two issues I want you to be sure of too is that with the e-manifest, the use of the e-manifest starts with the generator. Okay, so in other words, the generator starts at the transporter, or say transporter number 2, cannot start the e-manifest system as the waste is getting moving along the road. So the e-manifest, first of all, starts at the point of generation, so it starts with the generator, and only if that generator knows that everybody on that manifest is going to participate in the e-manifest system. So that's the first restriction. The second thing is that when the generator electronically signs off on the waste to the transporter on the e-manifest, then the generator is going to hand the transporter a paper copy of the e-manifest. And the reason for this is that, first of all, it's the Department of Transportation's hazardous materials regulation that hazardous materials have shipping paper. So that's one reason. Another reason is that if for some reason the EPA's electronic manifest system becomes unavailable for continued use, then the transporter at least has a paper copy of the manifest, and then there's requirements on what that transporter is supposed to do with that manifest. For example, make copies to make sure everybody in the line of custody there gets a copy of that manifest. So this will affect all of you guys, because all you manifest your waste off-site, and this is the first of phase 1 of the e-manifest rules. So, with that, you guys have any questions?
And Gary, if that didn't answer your question, let us know. Okay, looks like we've got some questions.
Woohoo!
Okay, so there will be some duplication of effort with electronic and paper copies.
Correct. There will be some duplication, but for good reasons. One is a department of. You got to remember, the manifest is really a Department of Transportation. It's a federal form. It's a federal system. So, Department of Transportation does want a shipping paper with all hazardous materials, and hazardous waste is a group of, or a subgroup of hazardous materials. And then, like I said, if for some reason the EPA's electronic system breaks down, there's a paper copy available to continue the shipment. Thanks for the question. That's a goodie.
Yeah, so he is saying DOT versus EPA, and Gary, if you want some further clarification, we'll need a little bit more from that question. Anybody else have questions of the e-manifest?
You got to remember the paper manifest is actually a Department of Transportation document, but EPA and DOT, got together to create that, to make sure everybody's concerns were taken care of.
Okay, so we've got a couple other questions. Which one will be the legal record?
Whichever one if you start off with the electronic manifest, that's going to be your legal record.
But if you start with the paper manifest?
If you start with a paper manifest, that's going to be your legal, what did the guy say? Record. Now, remember, you can use the paper manifest, and eventually it'll get to the TSD. What the TSD is going to have to do is send that information to EPA, so it'll be converted at that point into electronic information for the electronic manifest system.
Okay, so we've got a few questions. So please review the generator's responsibility again for the e-manifest. Does the generator initiate it?
The generator initiates it. So for some reason, only the generator, period, that's it. Transporter does not, transporter 2 does not. It's the transporter because they're responsible. That's where it starts.
Okay. From Joy Diaz, we have standard industry practices for shipping vendors to create shipping paperwork. Ideas for how that will be affected.
Yeah, read that again.
Standard industry practice is for shipping vendors to create shipping paperwork. Ideas for how that will be affected.
Well, it's going to be a federal, if you're going to manifest your waste today, you're going to use a federal paper manifest the way it looks like today. You can't create your own manifest. The same with these e-manifests. It's going to be a specific format. Yeah, you're not going to be making your own e-manifest layout. No.
Okay. And then there's clarification, when is the e-manifest to be implemented again?
Well, it's expected to be June 2018.
Okay. Can the service provider sign on behalf of the generator?
Well, the service provider, like the transporter, right? The transporter the transporter is not the generator. All right, now with these electronic manifests, there's a legal signature, all right? And EPA has come up with some criteria to determine what a legal signature is. One is that, first of all, it's got to be practical and economical for the generator to use. The second is that it's got to be legally enforceable and valid according to current or applicable EPA regulations or other federal regulations. And what EPA uses for this legal business is, you got a pencil? All right, 40 CFR Part 3. All right, that is, it's referred to as CROMER, which stands for Cross Media Electronic Reporting Regulations. And in that group of rules, it identifies what is a legal signature. So, first of all, it's got to be created by you. So it's got to have your own PIN number, say, or secret code. Second is that the code uniquely, you are uniquely entitled to use it. So in other words, you own it. The third criteria is when it's being used, somebody else is not using it. It's not compromised. So you can't give it to me and I sign off for you. Got it? And another criteria is that you got to remember the signatory, the person signing that manifest, is actually signing. Well, he has to have authority. That person has to have authority to sign that document by virtue of the position in the company. And when that person signs the electronic manifest, you got to remember, just like today, the person who signs that manifest, they're swearing up and down that the information on that manifest is exactly what is in that shipment. So, hope I got your question.
So is that a yes or a no?
So no, you can't share it.
Okay. All right, so one last question. It looks like maybe there's a couple more. Where will the e-manifest form live? Is it going to be on EPA's website, and where do we access it?
Yeah, that's going to be, it's going to live with EPA. They're going to have a website most likely. And their concept, EPA's concept, is that, you generators, they really don't expect you guys to go digging around, getting the manifest. I think what they suspect is that the transporter is going to provide the e-manifest for you as part of their service. Because, yeah, that's but it's going to be on the EPA's web site. Rob, do you think so?
Yeah, it'll be coming from EPA.
And this is a follow-up, I think, from the other conversation that we just had. Currently, the transporter can sign for the generator.
No, he can't. The transporter is not the generator, so on a paper manifest, a transporter cannot sign the generator. Period.
Okay.
Paper or electronic.
Or electronic.
Or electronic. So stop that practice.
Will the e-manifest have the same manifest number as the paper one?
Well, you mean like a paper manifest today? Well, e-manifest will be assigned their own unique number.
So I think what this person is trying to get at is there's duplication right now, or will be with the e-manifest and a paper one per
okay.
DOT. Would those have the same?
They should have the same, because all you're doing is taking you're going up to the Xerox copy, hitting the button, making a paper copy of that electronic manifest. So what you hand the transporter as a DOT shipping paper should match up with the electronic version that the same transporter is taken off with.
Okay. All right, we have one more question. If the generator does not have all of the information from the vendor taking the waste, such as a second transportation company, how is this information to be included in the e-manifest? Good.
Well, you know what? It's the generator's responsibility to set this all up, not the transporter. So if you don't know where your waste is going or who's transporting it, you better do it. It's the generator's responsibility to make sure that the waste gets to its proper destination through the proper transporters. So it's the generator's responsibility to have this all set up today with the paper manifest and tomorrow with the e-manifest system.
Okay. Oh, all right. One last question before we move on. Manifest rules allow for someone other than the generator to sign on behalf of the generator as offeror, if given authority by the generator. I'm wondering if we are confusing transporter with an offeror.
Oh, an offeror could be like the guy who packages the waste, Well, the signature, it's got to be a legal signature, and I just set out the criteria. So I don't know how EPA, that's a good one. I don't know how EPA is going to address the offeror situation now.
Okay, great. So we're going to move on. Thank you for these questions, and if we didn't get to it or if we didn't answer it in a way that was clear for you, get back to us, or we have a record of your questions, and we'll try to answer them more fully at a later date. So before we move on to the generator improvement rule, we're going to do a quick poll of our participants to see who is on the call. So just give us a moment.
Hey, I also want to know if you guys can hear me well.
We've had no comments that they can't hear us.
All right, good.
That's good. Okay, so there is going to be a poll question, and we are just opening it now. So who's on the call? And our options are small quantity generator, medium quantity generator, large quantity generator. I can't see all of our options.
DSDs, transporters, local government, other.
Okay, and for the local government, if you're state government or federal government or some sort of government agency, you can click on that one. All right, we're almost done. We got 77% of people have responded. Okay, I think that's probably, whoop. Oh, thanks, guys. 84%. Okay, so let's look at who we've got on the call. We have mostly large quantity generators and kind of a smattering of the others. Very interesting. Thank you for doing that for us. That kind of helps us as we sort of think, who's responding to our outreach efforts, who's wanting to learn more, and things like that. So thank you.
Smattering.
Oh, so I do have a comment. Technically, we are 3 types of generators, and I actually thought about that. There's a lot of you who are small quantity, medium, or large quantity generators. So next time I'll maybe do our poll a little bit differently. Okay, so let's move on to the generator improvement rule. So first, Rob is going to give an overview of the generator improvement rule, and we're not going to have questions after his presentation because Tom's going to go more into the details as we move forward. Okay, take it away, Rob.
Okay. Well, thanks, Tom, for that detailed explanation of the electronic manifest rule. Sounds like there's some big changes in the works as far as transporting hazardous waste. So with the GER rule here, I'm really just going to give kind of an overview and explain a bit about what Ecology did with this federal rule. And as I mentioned, it came out last year, actually November 28, 2016. EPA had some high goals with this rule, and it's a major restructuring of the regulations. So they wanted to make the hazardous waste rules, which is, I'm sure most of you know, are a highly complex set of regulations, difficult to navigate and all of that. So they wanted to make it easier to follow and comply with, and really use a common sense approach to organizing the rules according to your generator category. So with this reorganization, it's really much easier to know what rules apply to you, depending on whether you're a small quantity generator, medium quantity generator, or large quantity generator. And of course, we do understand that people can flex around quite a bit in between those categories. So the nice thing about all of this reorganization, it's no longer necessary to do extensive cross-referencing as you're trying to figure out what rules apply to you. So the rules end up being a lot more usable, easier to understand. And so with what Ecology has done, if you've had a chance to take a look at our draft rules, we've basically followed suit in what EPA has done in writing our regulations. And another goal EPA had was to address some long-standing issues with the RCRA regulations that really have bubbled up over the last 30-plus years, such as some issues with tank and container labeling, contingency plans, satellite accumulation areas, and closed containers. They also wanted to add a few new rules that had come in from the regulated community. And then these are intended to give some added flexibility in waste management. Additionally, they corrected some errors and removed some out-of-date programs. Tom will get into this quite a bit, but EPA has spent quite a bit of time in highlighting what conditions generators must meet to be able to accumulate waste without a hazardous waste storage permit, which they term conditions for exemption. And in fact, some of the rules. Our draft rules are titled Conditions for Exemption for SQG, MQG, LQG, and like that. And they're also emphasizing what they're calling the independent requirements and those other requirements that are not tied to waste accumulation. An example of that is obtaining an EPA site ID number. So you'll probably hear this again from Tom, but these really are not new requirements to follow, and they don't signify a change in either EPA's or Ecology's enforcement strategy. So the intent really is merely intended to lay a regulatory framework for generators to accumulate waste without a permit. So just to reiterate, this reorganization that we've taken on itself, it doesn't add more requirements to follow, increase the burden on generators. Some people new to the dangerous waste rules should love it. Other longtime users may find it frustrating at first to retab where their favorite rules exist. So I want to discuss a bit about how this restructuring looks. What we did is create some brand new sections within the dangerous waste regulations. Just in case you're not familiar with how Washington has organized our regulations, in the Washington Administrative Code, it starts out, the numbering starts out WAC, then the chapter number, and in this case, with dangerous waste regulations, it's 173-303. So the last number, or set of numbers, is the section number. For example, section 040 contains the definitions. So new sections have been created for generator category determination. That was old 07, section 070. There's separate sections for the small quantity generators and medium quantity generators, satellite accumulation area section, a section just for episodic waste generation, and EPA pulled together regulations for dealing with large quantity generator preparedness, prevention, emergency procedures, and contingency plans. Some of the existing sections we've had in our rules, such as the large quantity generator section 200, titled Accumulating Waste on Site, we've completely reworked that by copying over from some of the different TST sections, the various rules that apply to that generator category. Bridget had mentioned we had sent out an email with some attachments for people, and I imagine most of you got that if you'd signed in earlier before noon today. But one of those was a matrix or crosswalk handout that shows how the rules have been shifted around. You might find that useful. And I'll just go ahead and mention again that we're not today. There's quite a few changes that have been made in the rules. We're not covering all those topics, covering the ones that we think are most important and important issues to all of you people. Let us know if there's other topics that we should be covering. So how did we go about deciding what to adopt out of this big rule? If you've taken a look at the Federal Register, it's quite lengthy. So with most new EP rules that are coming out these days, states don't have to adopt 100% of them, and same thing with GER. But there are parts that are more stringent than existing hazardous waste rules that states do have to adopt. And for Washington, we are proposing to adopt almost the whole thing. Of course, we do have some Washington state rules that are go over or different than the federal rule. So as I said, GER does have some pieces that states need to adopt, such as the new hazardous waste labeling rules. EPA's thinking there was that they're concerned about safety to workers and site visitors. at hazardous waste sites. So the same thinking applies to a new requirement that came out for a summary of contingency plans for large quantity generators. And this is intended to quickly give the first responders the information they need to know to stay safe. Some of the other parts of GER are optional for states to adopt, and are intended to give some added flexibility in managing certain types of waste streams. For example, those exemptions, Tom's going to talk a bit about this, exemptions for waste generated from episodic events. Another rule exemption is the ability for large quantity generator facilities to consolidate waste from related small quantity generator facilities that are under the same management control. So you might be asking, when do I have to, or in the case may be, when do I get to comply with these new regulations? So generators are not required to comply with these GER rules until the state adopts them and they go into effect. So that'd be January of 2019. So, and that's the same thing for the optional pieces. Generators or TSDs can't use them until the new regulations are adopted. So I think, Tom, you're up next.
All right. Hey, so overall the generator improvement rule is really a good set of regs. It really is. Like what you know, everything Rob was talking about. So the rules are written easier to read. Therefore, they should be easier to comply with. EPA as well as Ecology took this time to look at compliance issues we've had, address those, look at issues that the regulated community has brought to our attention, and reorganization. Now, the reorganization of the dangerous waste regs, well, EPA's hazardous waste regs, is one of those concepts where we did not have to adopt, but we thought we would to make life easier for everybody. Now, so in general, when you step back, you have generator regs today. All right, today you have the generator regs, and basically they're a combination of the wastes of rules that regulate the generation of waste and rules that regulate the accumulation of the waste you just generated. All right. So what EPA is trying to emphasize is trying to separate those two concepts. Not adding new rules, just separate those concepts. So the generator rules, or the rules that affect the generation of waste, are things that you're used to today. For example, all generators have to designate their waste. That's not going to change. If you're a medium, large quantity generator, a generator rule is to get an ID number, manifest, do your annual report. Those things are not going to change. What you're going to see a change in is the name of the generator, say the generator rules that deal with the generation of waste. And they're going to be called the independent requirements for generators. Okay, and there's examples right there on the screen. And for a small quantity generator, their generator requirement is basically to manage the waste safely, right? So the concept is still there. The regs are still there. You still have to designate, etc. Now, so those are your generator rules. They're going to be called independent requirements, and they're all going to be lumped together in one section, section 170. So a small, medium, large generator could go to section 170, find out what their independent requirements are. Now, I'm going to take a step backwards here. Okay? Now, storage and accumulation. Now, as you know, storage has no time limit, all right? And over the past 37 years, we've been using the term accumulation simply to differentiate that you have a storage activity occurring by a generator in compliance with their generator rules. That's accumulation. It's a form of storage, okay? And EPA is highlighting that issue again because that concept's been lost over the years. So accumulation is a type of storage, and EPA is trying to make it clear that if you store waste, you store dangerous waste or hazardous waste, that's a permitted activity, like it is today, and I'll get to that in a second. So to avoid a permit, what do you guys do today? You comply with the accumulation standards. And if you're a medium or large quantity generator, that's basically starts with section what? Section 200. So it's not a new concept, okay? And that's got to be clear. So the accumulation standards are going to remain the same. In other words, you're going to have the same container and tank requirements, the same time limits and volume limits. So a medium quantity generator is still only going to have 180 days to hold on to their waste, all right? Now for small quantity generators, their accumulation standard basically was make sure that your waste goes to one of 8 places, right, which would be a hazardous waste facility, a solid waste facility, another one is a moderate risk waste facility. But what you're going to see a change in is the name of what's referred to as accumulation standards. They're going to be referred to as conditions for exemption, because if you comply with your conditions for exemption, you will not be required to obtain a TSD permit and comply with the TSD regulations. Now, what we've done is we've taken, over the years, the small quantity generator regs have been tucked away inside of the designation rules. We're pulling that out, giving it its own chapter. Medium quantity generators, if you're a medium quantity generator, you probably go nuts trying to find out all the rules that apply to you because they're scattered all over the place. They've been all put together in Section 172. And the large quantity generators, you got your own sections right there, 200, 202. Now, so the condition for exemption exempts you from getting, having to comply with the final facility standards. And like I said, it's not a new concept. If you look today in our rules, you have a generator rule and you have a TSD rule that mirrors each other. All right, so if you get your books, if you get your regs, it starts off in Section 170, where it basically says, I think it's like the third paragraph, it says, any generator who stores. So if you're accumulating waste, you're storing waste. So any generator that stores dangerous waste, you must comply with the TSD requirements unless you comply with the accumulation rules. So we're keeping the same concept, and so is EPA. We're just changing the name of it. And so lots of people were getting kind of nervous as if we're making all generators who accumulate all of a sudden be TSDs. And that's not the case. This is what's been going on for, like I said, like 37 years. So it's not going to change our, how we're going to address or how we're going to conduct an inspection. We're still going to treat these things the same. So this is the first part of the rule that we are adopting. It's not really new rules. It's just a new reorganization of the rules. Okay? So with that, do you guys have any questions on that concept, on that issue?
So we did have a question from Sheila Smith, and we got this when we had our public meeting last week in Bellevue. What was the rationale behind Ecology not adopting the same terms as EPA for generator status? Will Ecology look at establishing consistency with EPA terms for generator status? And I believe this is, we call them small quantity generator, medium, large, and they call them very small.
Gotcha. Yeah, good question. Okay, so there's many states, well, not many, but there's several states across the country that have kept their own and will keep their own terminology. So EPA has three groups of generators: large, small, and very small. We have large, medium, and small. So we've had large, medium, small forever, for 37 years or whatever. And so we're not throwing anything out new to our Washington State generators. We're not throwing out new terminology. We're not throwing any new concepts out. So we're maintaining it as is. That's not been an issue. And if you look today in the waste management across the nation, other states, some other states use different terms as well, and it does not seem to be holding up shipments of waste or generators knowing or not knowing what rules to follow. So we're keeping it as is for now.
Okay, and we have another question from Paul Martin. Does the definition that accumulation equals storage affect treatment by generator? For example, generators accumulating waste on site per generator standards can treat in tanks, containers, or containment buildings without a permit.
Right. So like I said, you guys will still be able to practice treating by generator, all right? Now, the thing about treating by generator is that other than thermal treatment, you guys know you can't do thermal treatment in a tank and container, all right? That's a permitted activity. But basically lots of other types of treatment, the idea is what EPA came down with is basically while the waste is being accumulated, so stored in your 90-day accumulation area, they will allow you to treat your waste if that treatment can keep you in compliance with the accumulation standards. So in other words, the lid has to be on, the container has to be labeled, you got 90 days to do it, all that kind of business. So you'll still be able to practice treating by generator.
Okay. I have a yay.
Woo!
Okay. Any other questions about conditions of an exemption and generator rules before we move on to the next topic? I'll give you a few more seconds to type in anything that you may have come up with for this topic. Okay, we're going to move on to the next topic, Tom.
Right. Hey, you guys are doing pretty good so far. Hang in there.
Yeah, and we recognize that webinars sometimes are a little tricky, and it's sometimes hard to get your question across, so we'll try our hardest to interpret what you've asked and answer that question. But again, there's other opportunities to ask questions through email or through our comment form that you'll get later.
Okay. Okay, so another concept that another set of rules that we're going to adopt, and again, this is less stringent, so we are not required to adopt it, but it's the concept that small quantity generators can send their waste to a large quantity generator. Now, this sounds like a pretty big freebie, but you guys know that nothing's for free, and there's going to be rules attached to all of these transactions. So think of it this way. The small quantity generator and the large quantity generator are basically the same business, all right? So what this does is today, if you're a small quantity generator, you have 8 different places where you are allowed to send your waste. This will be your 9th option. So it's going to be another opportunity for small quantity generators to get rid of the waste. This will work well, I see, for things like universities, say universities, and maybe even hospitals. So, but there's got to be a relationship between the small and large quantity generator, all right? And the relationship is that the small and the large quantity generator are under the control of the same person. That's the key. So this means the person with control has the power to direct the policies of both the small and the large quantity generator by virtue of maybe they own both businesses or ownership through stock or voting rights, for example. What this person is not would be a consultant. a counselor, a vendor, a transporter, a TSD, all right? Now, the small quantity generator will have some rules that they have to follow, such as now they have some container management requirements, like labeling. So, which small quantity generators don't have to do labeling right now. But if you're going to use this option, then the small quantity generators label their dangerous waste, dangerous waste or hazardous waste, and they have to put the risk label on. Now, the large quantity generator who is going to be accepting this waste, they'll have a little more requirements. They're going to have to notify Ecology 30 days before this relationship starts. The large quantity generator will have to keep records like who the small quantity generator is, the dates of the shipments, the amounts of the shipments, the waste types. The large quantity generator, when that waste gets on the property, a large quantity generator now puts on the date on that container. And that waste has to go directly to their 90-day storage area. So in other words, the large quantity generator cannot accept the small quantity generator's waste and bring it into their satellite accumulation area. So that's not allowed. Now, EPA was thinking, hey, that's a good deal. Why not? They don't really give a rip. You know why? Because once the waste gets to a large quantity generator, it's going to be heavily regulated. Now it's got to go to a TSD. Now it has to be manifested. Now LDRs apply. Now it's got to be reported, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know what? You got to think, if you really want to do this. But it's an option for you to think about. Okay? So that's a set of rules we're going to pick up. They're less stringent, but we're going to go ahead and give the small quantity generator and a little more flexibility, and like universities, for example. So this is a good one. So I saw there was a lot of smalls and larges on this site, on this webinar, so hopefully get some good questions.
Okay, so we do have quite a few questions, and there's still a couple of questions about the generator status and our rationale behind not changing that. And I encourage you to, we have that recorded here, that it can be frustrated, and I also encourage you to submit that in a comment form if that's going to be a real sticky issue for you as you do your work. So from Joy, we have, can a small quantity generator send to a medium quantity generator, all other things being equal?
No, and middle quantity generators are out of the picture. No, there's no option, no choice.
What will be the rules for how this waste is transported? Third party required, company vehicle,
good question.
DOT issues if the vehicle goes.
Got it. Yeah, good question there. So I'm a small quantity generator, and I got this relationship with my brother, large quantity generator. Well, if you look at the small quantity generator's responsibility on how to transport the waste today, the same things apply. So you can hire a hazardous waste transporter. You can put it in your own pickup and move it, okay? So there's no change in that. Of course, Department of Transportation rules have to be complied with hazardous material on the ground, but that's not our issue. But I see what you're asking. There's no change as far as a small quantity generator getting their waste to one of those 8, now one of those 9 places they're allowed to bring their waste.
Okay, we have another question from John Perry. How will this practice be addressed in the annual dangerous waste report? PM form, WR form?
Oh, that's a good question. So, again, starting with the small quantity generator, you don't have to, I think you may have to do a small annual report well, let me back up. No, I don't believe you need, as a small quantity generator, you don't need an ID number, so you don't have to do any kind of report. Now, the large quantity generator will be reporting this waste on their GM forms, and at this point, I don't know what those forms are going to look like and how they're going to be designed. I think EPA has already addressed this issue on their biannual reporting, and most likely we will probably reflect those as well. So to answer your question, I don't know what it's going to look like on the annual report. We haven't changed it yet. But the large quantity generator, since they're functioning as a pseudo TSD storage facility, they will have to report this stuff.
It doesn't look like we have any other questions. I'll give you guys a few more seconds to type any last-minute questions about small quantity generators sending to large quantity generators.
Do I have time to hit one of those other ones?
Which other ones?
From the last presentation, you said there was one or two?
There was just one asking about expressing frustration that the fact that our generator labels are different, that we've got large quantity, medium, small, and then EPA. So, like I said, we have that captured here, and then you can submit a comment about that if you'd like to. Okay, seeing no other questions, we'll move on to the next topic.
Okay, so the next topic I want to ask you guys is this. You come up to a drum of waste, you see one of these labels. Can you tell me what the hazard is? Okay? Just take a look. Now, let me ask you this. Suppose you come up to a 55-gallon drum of waste and you see labels. Without squinting, can you read these? And these are true examples. So, what we're doing here is the EPA, in the generator improvement rule, EPA is coming up with container and tank labeling requirements, hazard labeling requirements. Now, this is not new to us. In fact, I think EPA looked at our state and one or two other states on the labeling issue. So we've had labeling for 28, 25 years already. Okay, so it's not a new concept for us. But what is new is that we are changing what you know as risk labeling. We're changing the name to hazard labeling. And that's because EPA uses the word hazard labels. And if the waste inside your container has more than one hazard, then you got to label it with more than one label. Now, a hazard is basically one of four hazards. It's either toxic, reactive, ignitable, or corrosive. There's really no other reason a waste is a dangerous waste. So what we are proposing is that we don't really are going to, require the stickers or the labels come from a certain manufacturer or a certain program. All right, so you're pretty free to even design your own. But what we do want is that the labels be legible and recognizable at 25 feet, or the lettering on it be a half-inch in height. That's the first criteria. And the second criteria is that it basically it's understandable by everybody on your site. So by the employees, waste handlers that are going to pick up your waste, the public, the inspectors that come on site. And you're going to have different kinds of inspectors, not just hazardous waste inspectors, visitors to the site, and emergency responders. So it's got to be understandable to these groups of people. And this particular criteria is not new. This is what we require now if you look in 630, where the labeling is also. So if you come up to a container and you see one of these signs, stickers, labels, would you be able to make the decision to come closer, put that cigarette out, maybe get that respirator on, or just stay clear of it? Would you now have the choice? So this is the issue of a hazard label that EPA is bringing into the ballgame now. And like I said, it's not new to us. We're just changing the term from risk to hazard.
Okay. So in our public meeting, we had lots of questions about the labels. So if you have any questions, please type them in. We got some Class 9, not much hazard, so somebody was actually responding to your label. But I have a question from Paul Martin. Since visitors can include anybody from the general population, how can we comply with the requirement that all hazard labeling is understandable? For example, if we have an oxidizer waste, not everyone in the general population will understand oxidizer.
No, but an oxidizer is a reactive waste. So if you put the word reactive, all right, some oxidizer, like if you look at a DOT diamond for oxidizer, it'll be yellow. It'll say oxidizer under it. It'll have a yellow ball with flames coming out. So that might give a reasonable person, hey, I better not be around this thing. So we do want the common. I mean, we want the message to get to the person viewing or getting close to the drum, whether there will be a hazard to them, and give them the choice of getting closer or not.
Okay, great, thank you. So we have another question. We have quite a few. Our institution generates many small containers of waste, 1 gallon or less. Half-inch lettering will not fit on small containers. Will allowances be made for this situation? Well,
here's the allowance for that, because if you're a lab, you probably might see this as well. So the way EPA addressed this issue is that you put those smaller containers in a larger container and you label that larger container. So what EPA was saying is well, the advantage of that is now you have extra secondary containment.
Another question from Catherine. Are lettering required? International standards discourage words.
Well, it's got to be. It has to meet those requirements. So if you have a skull and crossbone, for example, there's no lettering, but you get the idea. Stay away. And this is for you got to. Oh, good point. Good point. You got to realize this is for the storing of dangerous waste on your property. All right, it's not. So there's labels out there that deal with the storing of products on your property, or there's labels that deal with the transportation on the road of materials. If they're appropriate for your accumulation, use them. For example, DOT has a red diamond with flames, and it says flammable. All right, that would certainly tell you don't smoke around me, right? Even though we regulate ignitable waste, the word flammable sends the same message: stay away.
From Tyler, does this include satellite accumulation areas?
I believe it does.
Okay. And from Joy, do these requirements, 25-foot, half-inch, etc., apply to all containers regardless of size? Oh, I think this got answered. Can we put these hazard labels on secondary containers that smaller containers are placed in? I think that got answered.
Okay.
There's a point that not everyone will understand reactive, so if you're thinking about general public, maybe not all of these terms will be understandable to everybody. I'm not going to read another one that he had sent. That's very funny. What hazard label would Ecology give persistent dangerous wastes that do not meet ignitability, reactivity, or toxicity criteria?
Oh, that's a good one. Persistent. Okay, persistent is not a hazard. Persistent is basically, all that means is that this thing hangs around a lot, right? The hazard of a persistent waste is often, 90% is toxic. The other percent is probably reactive, or it might be ignitable.
Okay, from Doug, why the need to be more stringent than already required by OSHA under worker right to know for the material that is not dangerous waste?
Okay, say that again.
So why the need to be more stringent than already required by OSHA under worker right to know for the material that is not dangerous waste?
Well, if it's not a dangerous waste, we're not going to require labels.
All right. Any other questions? You can type them into the Q&A and send them. Okay. Oh, I see. There's quite a few more. EPA said that hazard labels could be DOT, OSHA, and GHS, which is incorporated into OSHA. Are all DOT and OSHA labels acceptable as hazard labels?
No.
And then why was 25 feet chosen? Why not 20, 30, or 50?
That's a good question. We already have 25 feet in the rule for smoking signs, if that's required. So we weren't going to throw out another dimension, another sign distance. So one has to be closer and one has to be further away. So the generators already know about the smoking signs, and that would have to be 25 feet distance.
Okay. I'll give you another 15 seconds or so to type in any other questions that you have about labeling. So clarification from Doug about the OSHA and the not dangerous waste. And again, we recognize it's sometimes hard to get across your point in a chat box. So clarification. Why require a different label for a bottle of waste than for the same bottle of acetone? So I believe that you mean product versus waste.
Well, product versus waste. Well, we don't regulate products, and that's we're overstepping our boundaries with products. So we have wastes, and acetone. You could put ignitable. It's ignitable. You could put flammable. It's flammable. I'm not, okay, so I'll just leave it as that.
Okay. All right, so we're going to move on, and if we have more questions that we didn't get to, and if any of these need more clarification, if we're not quite getting to your question, you can send us an email, and we'll have that at the end of the presentation, or submit that as a comment, and we'll make sure that we address it. Again, webinars are great because we can get a lot of people in the same place with information, but it's a little bit harder to communicate sort of detailed stuff. So thank you for your patience with us on that, and we're going to move on to the next topic. Okay.
All right, so the next issue deals with weekly inspections. So if you look in sections like 630, we have container requirements that containers be inspected at least weekly. Well, there's no real definition of at least weekly. So the definition would be 7 consecutive calendar days from the last inspection. So, for example, I do an inspection on Monday, then my next inspection should be done by the following Monday. If I do my inspection Monday and I don't want to wait till a week, so I do my inspection Monday, and then 4 days later I do my inspection Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So Friday, then I have 7 days from Friday to do my next inspection. So it's 7 consecutive calendar days. So it's not 8 days or 10 days. It's not the beginning. It's not I do an inspection at the beginning of 1 week, let that week ride out, start week number 2, wait to the end of the week number 2 and do my next inspection. Because now, what do you have? You got like 14 days in between. That's not the intent. This is a preventative rule, all right? So it's not a business week. It's not a financial week. Holidays are included in that count, so are vacation days, sick days. So I think I'll open that for questions.
Okay, so if you have any questions about what weekly inspections are, and I did notice that we missed a couple of questions on the last topic. If we've got time at the end, we'll try to get back to those. And again, I apologize if we don't get to them, but we do have them all recorded here, so we will be able to respond to those. Okay, so what happens to the weekly inspection schedule for adverse weather?
Well, 7 days is 7 days. So, you know, adverse weather is coming. There's no reason you could do it earlier. But what I'm saying is that 7 days is 7 days. It doesn't, you know what? At adverse weather, the hazard of the waste doesn't take off. The hazard is still there. The hazard is still there if you take vacation or holiday. The hazard remains. So.
Just to be very clear, this is from Joy. If we did our inspection every single Monday, would that be in compliance or not?
Yes.
What if, and I know that we're going to have lots of what if questions. This has happened to us before. So what if an inspector calls in sick and they're in a different organization than me, 8 days in between from Michelle from?
Well, you know, 7 days is 7 calendar consecutive days. So you'll be out of compliance. I suggest you call the regional office.
Okay, so a couple of these questions are sort of this, like, you know, if there's a snowstorm
Sure.
and all this kind of stuff, and it sounds like if there's some crazy event that happens, if you call the regional office and sort of talk with them, that might be okay.
I'd call the regional office.
Did Ecology consider the EPA comment in the Generator Improvement Rule responsiveness summary that at least weekly, in quotes, is considered by EPA to mean once each calendar week?
Well, that's what it is. 7, you know, at least weekly. So, yeah, we looked at that, but you know, in the development of this at least weekly, EPA originally, you know, I'm saying 30 years ago, weekly inspections were 6 days apart. So we're throwing in an extra day. So the term weekly inspections without a definition is the problem. So now we've defined weekly inspections, so there should be no problem with when containers need to be inspected and the time between inspections. Yeah.
Okay, what happens if the business is closed for more than a week?
Well, the hazard does not take time off when the business does. So those containers need to be inspected. This is a preventative rule. What if you were gone for a week and it was leaking? You know, this is a preventative rule. This container thing.
Okay, from Catherine, where is the reference to the 7 days in the rules?
It would be in, well, there'll be a definition, so that'll be in 040. Then in the, in section, the MQG regs and the large quantity generator regs. You know, the exact citation,
Is it in that crosswalk that we sent them?
It might be. It might be. Yeah.
So in an email before our webinar, we sent a couple of attachments, and we had this cross-reference thing that kind of showed where the generator improvement rules were moving and in the regulations. So it may be in there. So I would ask you to refer.
So I think if you look in section 171, you probably see it for medium quantity generators, and you probably see it in section 200 for large quantity generators, tucked away somewhere.
Okay, from Paul, a rigid 7-day inspection will work for an LQG with maybe less than 100 drums, but will not be workable at a site with over 10,000 containers. One upset due to adverse weather or a sudden emergency that requires a facility closure will result in violations.
Good. Thanks.
Okay, comment noted. Any other questions about weekly inspections? You can send a message through the Q&A feature. I think we're going to get through this pretty quickly. We only have, I think, one more topic, and so if after that Q&A session, we'll still have some time for questions if we don't get to them.
Yeah, we could pick up on those, the other ones too.
Okay. All right, so we're going to move on, and then we're going to talk about episodic events. Episodic events.
Okay, so this is another part of the generator improvement rule that's less stringent, so we are not required to pick it up. But we felt we would pick it up. It would give some flexibility to small quantity generators and medium quantity generators only. And what it does is it provides the opportunity for small and medium, for some reason they produce a lot of waste that would normally jack them up, say, to a large quantity generator status, that they can keep their small or medium quantity status for all the other waste they generate, and if they manage this episodic waste under certain rules. Now, an episodic event will be, it's a planned event or an unplanned event. And it's an event that normally does not occur during routine operations at the generator site, but it did happen. And it generated an excess amount of waste. So an unplanned event is something that the generator obviously did not plan for, and he had no reasonable expectation that it was going to happen or to occur. For example, an act of nature, a flood, an earthquake. Another example would be of an unplanned event would be an upset in the production line. The generator didn't plan for that. They don't want them. Now, a planned event, basically what it says, the generator planned for and prepared for. For example, a clean out, a tank clean out. All right, that would be a planned event. Now, the small and medium quantity generators are allowed to have only one of these events a year. All right, so if you have, but there's certain rules. Now, there's exceptions to every rule, and so the exception here is if for some reason you need a second event. First of all, it has to be the type that did not just happen. So in other words, if you had a planned event, you may have an opportunity to have an unplanned event, and vice versa, right? So in other words, you cannot have two planned events, you cannot have two unplanned events. But the second event has to go through a petition process. The big advantage to the generator is that the episodic waste that's generated is not counted toward their generator status. But you've got to keep in mind is that it will count for P2 planning purposes, and it will have to be reported. So some of the rules to follow is that if you're a small quantity generator, you will be required to get an ID number. Obviously, a medium quantity generator will already have a number. Notification to Ecology. So for a planned event, you have to notify Ecology 30 days before this event occurs. For an unplanned event, for an unplanned event, obviously you're not going to know 30 days in advance it's going to happen. So once the unplanned event happens, like you had a flood, then you have 70. If you want to take advantage of these rules, you have 72 hours to notify Ecology, and then that has to be followed up within 30 days with a written notification. It can the waste that's generated from episodic event can only be stored or accumulated in tanks and containers. And labeling requirements like risk or hazard labels are going to be required, date, and rather than the term hazardous or dangerous waste, you put the term episodic waste. And you have 60 days. The event can last no more than 60 days. So in other words, the event, the production, the waste that's generated from the start of that event to the end is 60 days. The waste has to be off-site in 60 days. If you're a small quantity generator, it definitely has to go. It has to be manifested to a TSD. If you're a small quantity generator, it cannot go to your brother large quantity generator. Right? That's not an option. It's got to be manifested off-site to a TSD. And you cannot treat your waste on-site. Now, a medium quantity generator can treat their waste on-site. So they can treat them episodic waste, or they just send it to a permitted TSD. So it's a good rule. It allows a little more flexibility with small and medium quantity generators managing a ton of waste that they just, by accident, say, generated.
Okay, great. So we're going to accept questions on episodic events right now. There are a few questions that are a little bit off topic that we'll get to in a minute. Okay, so from Joy, so I understand that waste from episodic events must be reported on the annual report, but if it doesn't count towards generator status, how is that going to work?
Oh, the reports will be, the annual report. Well, first of all, if you have an active ID number today, if you're a small quantity generator and you have an active ID number, you are required to hand in an annual report, right? So that's nothing new. So what's going to be new is that our annual report is going to have to be modified to reflect episodic waste. So we'll have to work on that.
And how is the notification process going to work? Is that an email, call? Is it going to be an online form?
That's a good question. I believe it's in writing. Rob, do you remember? I think it was in writing. Dadgummit.
Two types of notification. One is the notification on the site ID form.
Yeah, site ID form.
So prior to the beginning of the planned event.
Oh, there you go.
And then a notification after, a notification which could be in writing, or I think we said a phone call to your regional inspector, regional office.
Okay. Okay, so for a planned event, it will be written, because you got to do that 30 days in advance, and that would be on the form, the generator, what do you call, what form?
Site identification form.
Site
Yeah, it's an addendum to that.
Okay. And then with an unplanned event, I think a phone call maybe, email. I don't have the rule in front of me, sorry about that.
It's 72 hours or 75 hours or something after the event. Yeah.
But then it has to be followed up with a written notification. Does that help?
I didn't see any
Right.
follow-up yet. So is there a limit to the number of waste streams generated, for example, liquids and solid, or the total waste generated? Ours tend to be due to construction projects, as the quantities can be quite large.
Good, that's a good question. No, there's no limit to the type, the amount of waste generated, and within that 60 days, you might have one or two projects going on the same site, and that's okay. EPA was okay with that. So,
Okay.
no limit.
Okay, I think this is the clarification. Can this be used for something like a stockroom clean-out?
That would be like a planned event. Sure, inventory, excess inventory.
Okay, we will keep accepting comments or questions on the episodic events for a few minutes, and then we'll move on to sort of general questions that we didn't get to, or if you have more. I'm also going to share some information on how you can comment, our website, which I'm assuming most of you know about since you guys are on this call, but I wanted to give you those links too. Okay, so first I'm going to go to the next slide that kind of provides information on how to comment. So if we don't get to your questions today, or if more come up, we're accepting comments and questions until December 19th. You can go to our website, and we've got information, including the draft rules there. To comment, you could, and on that website is also a link to our e-comments form. You can comment by email or by mail if you would like, but we do prefer if you use the e-comments form that you can find on our website. So I'm going to go back to some of the questions that we didn't get to yet. So, and I appreciate your patience as I kind of scroll through this. We have about 60 questions that we've gotten, so I'm going to try to make sure that we don't miss any of these. Oh, here's one. So, and I'm also very impressed that you guys were able to cite in some of your comments, very quick typers. Back to the GUR. This is from Mark. In the generator training requirements, for example, section 208, Ecology's proposed language is different than EPA's generator improvement rule. Specifically, EPA requires a program of classroom instruction, online training, e.g., computer-based or electronic, or on-the-job training. Section 208 omits online training. Was this intentional? If so, why?
No.
All right. Okay, so I would encourage...
I'd have to look at that, yeah, thanks.
Yeah, thanks for that comment. We'll have it recorded here, but then also you can submit that in a comment form as well. Let's see. So we've got a kind of a long comment from Paul about the 7-day inspection, the weekly thing that we know there's lots of questions about that. So the agency believes the term, quote, at least weekly to mean at least once each calendar week. Under this interpretation, while the calendar day an inspection could occur may change from week to week, one inspection would be required to occur within the calendar week as identified by the generator. Thus, one generator could define their calendar week as Monday through Sunday, while another generator could define their calendar week as Wednesday to Tuesday of the following week. Whatever the prescribed calendar week would dictate the days an inspection would be required to occur. Hazardous waste, GUR response to comments, and he gives a citation.
Okay, we're not using calendar week. We're defining it as 7 consecutive days.
Okay.
So not week, so and that was part of the issue. Everybody's coming up with their own definition of week. So now weekly inspection is 7 consecutive calendar days. So that's pretty simple to follow.
Okay, so another question, Joy. I had a question about, quote, any person who discovers an unknown material is also responsible for accurately designated that waste. This seems completely unreasonable and impractical. Would it be just as protective to say that the discoverer identifies?
Well, so I don't understand what.
Oh, so sorry, it was a to be continued. There's a character limitation on the question boxes. Wouldn't it be just as protective to say that the discoverer identifies the waste as potentially a dangerous waste and turn it over to the person responsible for a waste designation?
All right. So the person responsible for the designation would be the site, the generator, right? And this happens a lot. I understand it. You get waste dumped on your property, right? So the rules are saying, we understand that, but that doesn't allow the waste to hang around for 10 days or actually 10 weeks for your vendor to get out there and do the designation, okay, which is happening, I believe. So that does not create a safe environment, right? Because who do you know? It could be reactive. It could be, poisonous, whatever. So the steps have to be taken upon, you're finding out that you have this waste dumped on your property, or you generated a waste from a process that you didn't expect. Again, you have to start the process right away, because you don't know how to protect your employees. You don't know how to protect the public if you don't know what's inside that drum. So it's a safety issue.
Okay, so we have a question about labeling. So it's about the DOT label for a Class 9, the umber and the striped background. Not everyone knows what this means. What other pictogram would be required to distinguish its hazard?
That's the good question, because that's the point right there. You don't know what that hazard is. It doesn't, remember, there's 4 hazards: ignitable, corrosive, reactive, toxic. At number 9, if I look at number 9, it's not telling me none of that. So I could write the word toxic, I could put the crossbones on it, I could, if it's ignitable, I could put ignitable, flammable, I could use a crayon, I can make my own sticker, it's pretty open to, we're not dictating that you must use a certain DOT sticker or a certain global harmonization sticker or OSHA sticker. No, we don't want that. We just want some criteria to be met and that is clearly understandable by somebody seeing it, that for their own protection, stay away or not.
Okay, a couple more questions about labels. So this is related to people putting, or generators putting smaller things into a larger container. So we work in a lab and they generate many small bottles. Is it allowable to have a poster above the secondary containment for satellite accumulation areas, citing all of the hazards?
No.
Any follow-up on that? Just
no. Are they asking for a follow-up?
No.
No.
Okay. So EPA stated generators could use several established methods for hazard label. Per the Federal Register, that is, we propose that generators could indicate the hazards of the content of the container using any of several established methods, including, but not limited to, an EPA hazardous waste characteristics, ignitable, corrosive, reactive, or toxic, a hazard class label consistent with the DOT requirements at 49 CFR Part 172, Subpart E, labeling, a label consistent with the OSHA Hazard Communication Standard, a chemical hazard label consistent with the NFPA code, or a hazard pictogram consistent with the United Nations Global Harmonized Systems.
Okay.
We also propose that generators could also use any other marking or labeling commonly used nationwide in commerce that would alert workers and emergency responders to the nature of the hazards associated with the contents of the containers.
Okay, good. So one problem with that is you did not mention the public, visitors, etc. All right, that's another group. That's another population we're trying to protect. Another issue is that the Federal Register uses those as examples, not requirements. And it also, the intent is that those labels are appropriate if they relay the hazard to employees, workers, waste handlers down the line, and the public. All right? So that's the problem, you see. Some of these international symbols might work great in France, but they mean squat here, okay? Because, for example, you got the exclamation point. You got the number 9. They're not telling the person the hazard inside. Now, some of these organizations have some good labels, right? Like the harmonization, the global harmonization. They got a sticker with a dead fish and a broken tree that's been dead. That's sending the signal, stay away, I'm poisonous. Right? The same group has one that looks like a rolling pin. Now, if we were going to regulate a baker, that might mean something, but it really doesn't. And I don't know what it means. And the general public would not either. So you got to look at, how am I going to protect the public? And you got to realize, too, these rules are written for everybody, not just They're written for all the generators, even the small generator who might have a small garage, right? And people are walking by. You know, they okay, so I'll leave it at that.
Okay, so a follow-up on that. Is Ecology saying there are only 4 hazard labels?
No, what I'm saying is that there are only 4 hazards.
The characteristics.
And criteria.
Yeah.
Which is toxic. There's lots of different kinds of toxic. So the 4 hazards have to be properly portrayed on the container.
On a different note, Harold is asking about proposed section 203C3, and I apologize, I don't know quite how to read out citations. Requires aisle space to allow for a complete inspection of each container. Does this affect storing 4 drums on a pallet? Sounds like it.
Well, you know, Harold, if that pallet is tucked away in the corner, how am I going to inspect that pallet that's in the corner? So I don't know what you're talking about. So just 4 pallets in the middle of the room, there is no aisle space. Right, so you got to think about how can those, and that happens. You know, you got a pallet stuck in the corner underneath a shelf. Hey, that's just not good, right? And that's a safety issue too. That's a preventative requirement. You can't go around and inspect it. Okay.
Okay, so I think this is some clarification from Joy about the. This is going back. A person in that scenario of whoever discovers that dangerous waste. She says, by using the term person, I'm interpreting that as any individual. The scenario I'm thinking about is if a custodial employee discovers a nasty container or something, are they responsible to properly designate that waste, or could it be passed to the person of the company that is normally responsible for waste designation?
Well, you know, the person responsible for waste designation could be located in Florida. Is that right? If you're a big company, like we have a couple of big companies, right? But we're not. The intent is not to nail the custodian, right? So you know, it's assumed he's going to run straight to the boss and say, "We got something here," and the boss is inspected. Let's start figuring out what the heck it is.
Okay, I hope that helps. Is there a limit on the number of waste codes placed on the dangerous waste label in WAC 173.303, section 193B?
No, I don't think there's a limit. No. Okay. No. There might be a limit on the manifest, right? The manifest allows 6.
So from Michelle, out of curiosity, would a Mr. Yuck sticker qualify for Washington toxic containers? It means stay away and do not eat. I don't think we've
I was saying no to that rascal.
I have a 3-year-old, and I totally understand the Mr. Yuck stickers. I don't think that passes our regulations, though. Okay, any other questions? I'll leave it open for a little bit. It looks like we are going to get out at 3 or earlier, which is great. I had extended the time just to make sure that we could get to folks' questions. And again, this isn't your last time to be able to comment or question. We've got until December 19th. For those of you who are in Eastern Washington, we are having a public meeting at our Spokane office on December 4th from 9 to noon. So it'll be another opportunity to learn. It'll be a very similar presentation, but there'll be Ecology staff there so we can chat, and the Q&A session definitely is a little bit different because of the in-person nature of that.
Are you saying if they want to meet us, they could come?
Yeah. Another question, there is new language in section 0703A about beginning designation immediately at the point of generation before any dilution, mixing, or other alteration of the waste occurs. You don't mean that designation needs to be done before an accumulation container is full, does it?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were just talking.
No, it's there's new language in 0703A about beginning designation immediately at the point of generation before any dilution, mixing, or other alteration of the waste occurs. You don't mean that designation needs to be done before an accumulation container is full, does it?
Hey, whoa. You know, a container could be 600 gallons. It might take you 4 months to fill that up. So once you start generating that waste, you got to know what you got. You have to start the process because you have to know how to properly store the waste, how to label it, so people aren't going around smoking. So, yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
It looks like, you know, we're getting a couple of questions and clarification from this. So this is all recorded. So we're going to formulate a more formal answer to this question because there seems to be a few people who are concerned about this sort of point of generation. And so I have a question from Eric. What is the comment period? And so I don't know, Rob, if you want to respond to, like, what is an informal comment period, which is what we're in now, versus a formal comment period, and what types of comments and things like that?
Yeah, sure, Bridget. So, yeah, we started October 19th, I believe, with this comment period. So it's basically, and just to stress, we are these are draft rules, they're not a formal proposal. So we're just want to make sure, as we're hearing from you, that we're kind of bringing out any issues people have before we actually formally propose rules, because it becomes more difficult to make changes after we formally propose next year, next summer. So, but we did need to set a date or a time limit for these formal comments or informal comments to come in, which is until December 19th. But again, our lines are open. Tom, myself, and others here would be certainly willing to talk, and that HWTR rulemaking at ecy.wa.gov is a good way to get questions into us. So we're glad to continue the discussion, outside of the comment period. But we are on a path here to finish up the rule and get a formal proposal in the spring. So I hope that answers that question.
Okay, great. Thank you, Rob. I got another question from Harold. Can you elaborate on the change to WAC 173.303.351, applicability of contingency planning to include, quote, any event or circumstance?
How's it going, Harold? Like I have that open right in front of me, but you know, anything that causes a contingency plan to be initiated. I know, like EPA would have fire, explosion, and one other thing, but you know, there might be other things that cause the initiation of a contingency plan. Spill. I think it's spill, right? Fire, explosion, spill. That's what EPA has, or something like that. So, okay, can you just reread that question one more time?
Can you elaborate on the change to WAC 173.303.351, applicability of contingency planning to include, quote, any event or circumstance?
Oh, so, yeah, I mean, you know, we can't start listing out all the types of events or circumstances. Not every site is the same. Every site may have their own sensitive issues. I mean, let me look up this rule real quick here. natural disaster. Okay, I'm not sure what you're asking for, Harold, but if you're trying for us to define event or circumstance, we're looking for if any kind of dangerous waste or dangerous waste constituent is getting emitted into the environment. That's what we're looking at. And so, I don't think it's possible to list out events and specific circumstances. Like I said, every site's different, and
Could be a forklift.
yeah, it could be a forklift, it could be a transformer, it could be, you name it.
Okay. All right, great. Well, thank you. We're getting a couple of suggestions on, maybe we need to reflect some of these things better in our wording, and those are really great comments. Those will help us decide on sort of our final draft. All right, so we've got 2 more minutes until 3. You guys have been sticking with us. This is great. There's almost 60 people still on the line. So if you have any other last questions, I'd like to end us at 3 if possible. All right, we got another one. It says language. It's another comment about the language being a little vague on some of these things. So that's great for you to send that as a comment that, if things need some more clarification or more details, then we can consider those.
And I would like to chime in there as well, and in the past we've had comment forms for people to be able to provide us with their suggested rule language, and with the e-comment system that we have, which is new and we think is going to work really great. It has that same function where you can if you have an idea where some language can be changed, just go ahead and use whatever method you can, track changes, underline, strike out, show what you would be suggesting, and that really helps. And also giving us the specific citation of the rule that you are interested in having it to be modified.
Great. Okay, so we got one last question. I'll add a quick one. Any thoughts on why Sections 400 and 600 add requirements for inspection, training, and contingency planning for generators adding sorbents, compacting, or sorting waste in containers?
Okay, repeat that.
Any thoughts on why Sections 400 and 600 add requirements for inspection, training, and contingency planning for generators adding sorbents, compacting, or sorting waste in containers?
Wow, no, I don't have any comments on that. I think that's just an old rule.
I don't think we added anything.
Yeah, we didn't mess around with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, thank you for joining us today. This is, rulemaking is kind of complicated, and of course these regulations are also complicated, and these are major shifts in the way that the rules and the regulations are organized. We appreciate your feedback. We want to know, how does this affect how you do business? Are there language suggestions and anything else that you can think of? That would be really helpful as we move forward through this rulemaking process. We will have this webinar available online. We've recorded it, and so we'll put that online for you if you want to go back to look at it or if you want to share it with others. And with that, I just want to say thank you.